Hello everyone, welcome back to the Nazaré Podcast. Well, today we're here with a waterman, a big wave surfer, a shaper, owner of Dylan Shapes, Dylan Longbottom, right?
Yes, that's it.
How are you, Dylan?
Good, thanks, mate. Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Nazaré Podcast. Man, as I told you behind the camera, I wanted to talk. At the beginning, my idea was to talk with you only about boards. But then, man, I was doing the script, thinking about the questions. And I said, man, it's impossible to have you here and not talk about your story,
Yeah.
I would like to start. If you can tell us where you were born, about Cronulla, your story when you were a kid.
Yeah, yes, I was born in Cronulla. It's a big surf town on the southern end of Sydney. And it was where my father made surfboards. He was a glasser. He wasn't a shaper, but yeah, he was a bit of a legend glasser. And yeah, I used to hang in factories as a little grom in Cronulla. And Cronulla is famous for a few slabs called Shark Island. And you would have heard Cape Fear or Owls. And but when I was about 7 or 8, my family moved down the coast, and a town called Dapto.
Yeah.
It was a footy town, not a surf town.
How far is Cronulla from Dapto?
It's like 1.5 hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cronulla, it's considered Sydney.
It's considered Sydney. Yeah.
It's a bit the outside, right? It's like
yeah,
what, 20
it's
minutes, 15 minutes, more or less?
It's on the edge. It's on the
edge.
southern outskirts. And then I moved down the coast where we call the South Coast, and they're more country towns. And it was nice, it was a beautiful place to grow up. Dapto, yeah.
There's a lagoon.
And then it was like 30-minute drive or trains to the beaches. But there's so much variety and so many good beaches. So that's where I ended up growing up and going to school. And down there also is a lot of really hollow, like mini Nazare, a beach called Mystics. That's
your beach, right?
That was my beach, yeah. So where I really learned how to surf barrels.
Wow.
And then surrounding that, we had some crazy slabs when there was only like not even a handful of guys surf it, a few bodyboards that surf it. But yeah, and that's when I started stepping up and learning how to surf heavier waves. And so it was really good growing up down there and taught me a lot.
So you started surfing, when you were a kid, you were surfing a lot with bodyboarders, right?
That was at the slabs when I started.
Okay. Not in Mystics.
In Mystics, it was a mix. Big bodyboarders and surfers.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a mix.
So Mystics is a wave that when you moved there, you just started surfing there. Or it's a heavy wave where you had to.
It was a heavy beach break. Yeah, there's a couple other beach breaks where my dad would take me. One was it's right near there called the Farm.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful wave, super easy, and that was our younger years, and then. Once we got 13, 14, and then it was Mystics and other beaches, but that was our beach, yeah.
Yeah, so your father is a glasser.
Yes.
He was a glasser.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit how was for you, man, you're a second generation, right?
Yes.
How was growing up next to the shape room and like smelling the foam, you know? Like.
Well, that's where my dream of becoming a shaper, that's where it all started.
Yeah.
So I was from a baby, I was in the... factories with my father, and he was in there glassing all the time. Like he worked for G&S or Gordon Smith. Probably the biggest brand in the world back then. Yeah. And they had all the legends, like world famous shapers come and shape there, and they were huge. And then I'd be cleaning the bays, and I'd go get the lunches for the shapers and the sanders and the glasses, the shop workers, and they were like gods to me, and they had funny names at the front of it, and you'd look into the shaping bay and you see them shaping, and I was just kind of worshiping. I was like, wow.
No machines at that moment, right?
No machines.
Not at all.
No. Way off. This is in the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, so, but before that, my father was probably the pioneer, the first board makers in Australia. Wow. In the 60s, going into they were the first ones.
What an era, no? What a moment for surfing, man.
Crazy. So the boards, there was only longboards then in the 60s, and they'll glass them with 12-ounce glass, and the boards are so heavy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But then they changed, then the short boards come, the single fins, and so my dad had to do all the fins too, because all
the single fins with the tail like
pintails.
tail.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And then the 70s come, then the twin fin come.
Yeah.
And then the thruster. And so my dad was glassing, and they were all set fins. There was no future boxes or FCS2.
Yeah.
So he had crazy amount of work.
Wow.
And yeah, it was so good. And then that just embedded in me. But, you know, once I went to school, once I left school, I didn't have the opportunity. I was kind of surfing, sponsored, but I ended up going into the building trade and becoming a bricklayer.
Really?
But
Yeah.
which really taught me how to work hard and a lot of work etiquette, how to work hard.
Yeah.
And I worked with a lot of surfers, and so they just let me have time off when I have a surf contest or it was a big swell.
Bueno.
So it was a kind of blessing in disguise, and it taught me my hand-eye coordination because I was building walls and it was everything had to do.
You can't miss 1 centimeter,
Can't
right?
miss, yeah. So
Yeah.
it really trained me for shaping. It was like another blessing in disguise.
Amazing,
Which was
man.
part of my journey, and yeah, I've done that for like 6-7 years.
But if we go a little bit backwards, because you told me at that moment you're already a pro surfer. You had some sponsors, more or less.
Yeah.
So you were really, I mean, you had this passion in your blood for shaping, but you were super into surfing also, right?
Yeah. So my main goal was to be a pro surfer. You know, at the shaping, it kind of
That was part of the society. Like all your friends were in the same mood, right? When you breathed surfing, like
Yes.
we have to be pros, right?
Yeah, we wanted to be, and that was our dream as well. If you could become a pro surfer, that's the dream life.
Yeah, for everyone.
And you know, like my heroes were Martin Potter and Kong, Tom Curran. You know, they were the generation before me.
Yeah.
And my father was also a judge at the World Tour, which was called the ASP World Tour.
You were
then.
super into the
Yeah, so
scene.
I get into all the contests, and he was a judge, and all his mates, and one of his best mates, Graham Cassidy, he ran the World Tour. He was the president of the ASB for, God, it must have been at least 15 years. So we'd be at all the contests in Australia.
Wow.
As little kids as well.
You
And
were
then I was
there,
just
man.
looking at the
It's
boards.
Disneyland.
It'd be a board rack, like Tom Carroll's board, and I got to touch him, and
Crazy.
like Shane around, let me go surf it as a kid. He goes, yeah, go ride it. So
Yeah.
I was deep. I was blessed.
Man.
Blessed.
So you were working as a, how do you say, brick lane?
Yeah.
And you were what, 18, 19?
Yeah, like from 18 to onwards.
And you tell me.
Yeah, so but I did the contest scene and the WQS, but my surfing didn't suit the, you know, I traveled to Europe, to South Africa, and every contest was like 1-2 foot, like terrible.
Yeah.
And it just didn't suit my surfing.
It's still a bit like that, huh?
Yeah, it's still a bit like that.
QS it's tricky. Huh?
Yeah, but it was about that time when I was Billabong sponsored me when I was 18.
Okay.
So yeah, now I'm 50, so 32 years with Billabong.
Wow, man.
And they could kind of see that, and they started sending me on trips with Brendan Markinson and Oki.
Yeah.
And I'd get the photos and just charge and do airs, and so I was really got a lot of photos, and the magazines, the photographers liked me, and so that started leading me down that path. But there's not much money. I just got some free trips, and
Well, it's not bad.
It's not bad.
It's
yeah,
not bad.
It was awesome.
At least you don't pay the rent.
But it didn't pay the rent. So,
Yeah.
So my brick lane was my pay the rent.
Bueno.
Yeah.
Man, so you started traveling when you were 19?
Yeah.
What, your first trip? Tahiti?
Yeah, my first trip was to Tahiti.
Yeah?
Yeah, with Munga Barry and Margot.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And we met up with Poto and his brother. And this was before anyone knew it. It was called End of the Road. It was 1997.
Wow, man.
Yeah, it took us to the end of this place. And
To the jungle.
It was, yeah, and it was a jungle then. And it was the most glassiest day, hottest day ever. And probably solid 8 feet.
Wow.
It was unbelievable.
You were charging already.
Yeah, yeah.
How was your transition? It wasn't a transition, right? To big wave surfing. So you had this passion also for big waves since you were a kid.
Yeah.
Like you were from the group.
Yeah.
Like the one that sits.
Yeah.
The
I was
deepest.
the crazy one. My brother was the opposite. And,
Darren, right?
Darren, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll go into his story in a sec, and all my mates and they'd all sit here and I'd be always over there.
Yeah.
And then I'd go stupid stuff, not make it. And they're just like, what are you doing? And it was like, oh, I'm going to try and make it. Getting smashed and all the time. But I had that into me. I didn't have the switch, or
Yeah. You were a kid.
I was a bit crazy, so you know, in any sport, and
Yeah.
I was doing that already. So it was a progression, of course.
Yeah.
But then I just kept evolving, and I was always into airs as well.
Yeah.
because
I know. You won the first air contest.
Yeah, I got Aussie right. Got first, I got second. It was like a tie.
Yeah.
But yeah, first ever air show.
Yeah.
But because Potts was my favourite surf, I'd always just try airs. But I wouldn't make many. My brother was like,
man,
"Stop
it's
trying,
about
man,
that.
You keep falling off."
It's
But
about that, man. It's about practice,
I
right?
was practicing,
Yeah.
man, and it was years and years of doing it.
And you did it.
And I did it. Yeah. So it was big waves and airs, you know, and that was my
Nice.
thing.
And you also have this passion inside for shaping. I imagine yourself in this group of friends being the most crazy, sitting the deepest
Yes.
for the bump. Were you the nerd of surfboards or not at all? Like, watching the outlines and or not?
I was into it, and at the time I was sponsored by Nev, and Nev was one of the biggest then, and that's when I was really starting to, you know, I was starting to grow up, and I was in my, how old was I? I was early 20s, and I was thinking about it, and then I had me and my still partner to 32 years as well.
Yeah.
We had our first son.
Okay.
And then just as she was pregnant, I went, I wanted to learn. Something happened to me, and I said, I want to shape. I want to learn. I want to shape my. That's what I always wanted to do.
Okay.
And she's like, do it. Go for it. Do it.
Yeah.
So,
Good partner, man.
So yeah, really good partner.
Yeah.
And she's been there and been my biggest supporter.
Bueno.
And a lot of people are like, you're crazy. You're like, I had a business then, and people said, nah. And even my dad, they will say, there's no money in surfboards, you know.
No,
but
in shaping, no, it's like,
there's still not. You know, we do it. The shapers do it, and the people for the love and for the lifestyle. You drop when the surf's pumping, you drop your tools, and it's flexible.
yeah,
But we do it for the passion,
yeah,
and the passion was there. And then what really ignited that was I went and actually borrowed money. I was pretty poor.
yeah,
And bought a planer. There's no machines then.
No.
Bought a planer.
yeah. The
Found my
planer is
favourite
this one,
board.
the
Yeah, electric planer, big one, heavy one. It was the Crossroad.
Okay.
And that was, you know, my wife said do it, so I was all right. I'm going to do it. And I went and bought 2 blanks in Sydney near Cronulla.
Yeah.
I bought the planer and a few tools, and I went to a local shaper, gave him some money to use his shaping
The room.
the room.
Yeah.
And I knew in my head what I wanted, like I knew in my mind. But
Those boards were for you, right?
Pardon?
The boards were for you.
Yeah, for me. I was
Yeah.
making a board for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I made a 6.0 performance board, round tail,
Yeah.
and it took me hours, like, you know, it took me 3 hours planning and everything.
Yeah.
And it came out so good, and it was the best board I ever rode.
Really?
And-
your
and-
magic
It was
board.
my magic board.
You still have it?
No.
No.
At
At that moment, maybe you don't realize, right? Like
I didn't realize.
to save it for today.
I wanted to, but this is what happened. I went that good. I took it to Hawaii. I surfed it every day. I surfed it in the air show, that first one. I kept it for like 2 years, and then I broke it and I put it together. But I was still shaping, but I was always going back to that board. Like that was my master.
Wow.
And it went so good. I kept putting back together, but ended up smashing. And me and my wife moved around a lot, and so yeah, it was pretty hard. You know, it's
to
like
keep it.
26 years now, but I wish I'd have.
Yeah.
But it was the magic board.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then my brother would order board, and then some mates, and I'd get 1 order a week, and then it was 2, and then 3, and by the second year, I was starting to get some more. And then it was a slow progression. And after my 3rd year, I went shape for a local guy, Raf Riddell.
Yeah.
And he was right into like some big wave surfing, windsurfing. And then he taught me a lot. And then Insight Surfboards picked me up.
Okay.
And they shaped Channel Islands. And Simon Anderson was there. So
Okay, so that was a big step.
it was a huge step. It was a massive step. When I was like, couldn't believe it. Within like 3 years, I was shaping for Insight, which is one of the biggest
Yeah.
surfboard companies in the world.
You're still surfing a lot, right?
Still surfing a lot.
A lot.
Yeah. I was still like, I was
Yeah.
focused as much as I was surfing as I was shaping.
Yeah.
So I'd balance that out. And if I had I'll still start doing a lot of surf trips for Billabong,
Yeah.
with like Margot and Rasta. So yeah, we were doing lots of trips.
Man, you had good trip partners, huh?
Yeah.
Hockey.
Yeah.
Well,
And then Andy Irons come sponsored by Billabong. So yeah, I started doing some trips with him.
him.
And,
Wow.
and Parker was a lot
Parker
younger.
also.
So him and Parker a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd done a lot of trips with Mick Fanning and Dingo and all that crew.
Filming a lot. And
Yeah. But I'll go back to where I was. So I ended up there for 4 years shaping.
Yeah.
And Simon Anderson was there, and he was like a god, shaping god.
Wow.
And he was so gentle giant. He was so friendly, and talked to him. And
You
he
learn
knew
a
my-
lot with him.
He knew my dad. My dad glassed some for him back in the day.
Ah.
And but then JS called me,
Okay.
and Billabong started wanting to make surfboards. And so he goes, I want you to come to Queensland, and you can make me and you and Stuart Darcy are going to make Billabong boards.
Okay.
And you can make your own boards too. So you have your own brand and Billabong.
Bueno.
And I told my wife, and we just had Summer then, my second kid.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So we moved to the Gold Coast.
Bueno.
And this was the huge step. I was going to work with JS. That's when he was already just taken off.
Yeah.
And it was a huge
And
factory.
and Gold Coast is like the mainstream, no? Like
Yeah.
everything is happening there. Right? It's
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, huge factory. Is like 10 shapers, 10 glasses. And then, we're at Kira.
Yeah, Kira.
So, yeah, it's an awesome place to live. It was a lot warmer.
Yeah.
And perfect waves. It was really good for my kids because that's where they learned to surf. And, I ended up spending nearly 9 years there.
Wow, a lot.
Yeah. And that was when I was, Andy was with Billabong and JS. And
Which year is this? Are
this
we
was
talking about more or less?
2003
2003.
to 2009.
And you were already charging
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. So, and then at this stage, Shipstones wasn't really discovered.
Okay.
Places like these other bigger slabs.
Yeah.
And so Margot and Rasta went there first.
I mean,
I went, Dylan, we're going to take you there. And that's when I went JS. I said, oh, man, I want to make a toe. No one was making toe boards.
No.
I think Morris Cole was probably the only one.
So, okay, so at this point, you already knew about, because towing was starting like 95, 94, something like that.
Yeah,
right?
it was Laird Hamilton that I was
Yeah,
looking
Lord
at.
Hamilton in the 93, 94,
Where-
with the boats and stuff.
I even think it was late 90s. It wasn't even that early.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, 95, 96, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So you already heard, you knew what towing was
Yeah.
at this point.
And then the big one in my mind was the Laird Hamilton, the Millennium Wave,
Okay.
which is 2000.
Yeah.
A Chumbo,
Yeah.
the glassy, the crazy one,
Yeah.
when he's got his foot up.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. But at the time, I was learning so much from JS. Like he was my mentor and all the shapers there. There was so many good shapers that become my really good friends.
Yeah.
And we all learned a lot from each other. And then it was about late 2003 or 2004. And I went, I'm gonna make my own toe board now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Different.
And he's like, yeah, go for it. Like,
That's a different
totally different.
business.
Yes. And I didn't ask anyone. I didn't know anyone making them.
Yeah.
I only Laird Hamilton, and I knew of Morris Cole, but I didn't know Morris.
Yeah.
And I just kind of winged it and thought what to make and glass it heavy. And I had set fins. There was still no boxes. And I used the planer
Yeah.
and glassed it heavy and then put straps on. And I went down to the local truck company for wheels. And that's where I bought lead weight.
Ah, okay.
And they stick them on.
Uh-huh.
And so I was putting weights on.
Yeah. It was inside the glassing already?
No, on top.
On
I
top.
put it on top. Yeah. So it gets pretty heavy. It was pretty rad board. It was a 6'2". And then I had it ready. It was fluoro orange.
So it was a 6'2"
Yeah.
toe board.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they are not that large,
No,
right?
we've come down a lot.
Yeah.
And so, because then back them days, our short boards were like 6'3".
Yeah.
We rode
Yeah,
long,
yeah.
skinnier boards.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
it changed. So Yeah, and then I had it ready, and then I got the invite to come to Shipsterns for a swell. All right, I'm going to test it at Shipsterns.
Yeah, just
crazy.
test it, man.
Test it.
Sorry, let's think about this.
Yes.
I'm gonna test it in shivering. Crazy.
I didn't even take it at Cura or a big beach.
Yeah.
I took it straight. She'd never tried it.
Man.
And it was my first trip to Shipsterns too. I never
Really?
seen
You
it.
never surfed the wave, anything?
Hadn't surfed the wave, hadn't tried a
You were crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry to say, but man.
And then it was a slow day, and the swell was building, and we waited and back
Well,
and
at least
forth.
something good. Sorry, good.
Yeah, and then I got a few. I was feeling the board out,
Man.
and feeling the wave out. Like I had no idea about this wave.
Feeling good, the wave under the feet.
And the wave just had so much draw and steps, and I was trying to work the wave out, let alone the board. And then as the day went on, I was getting more confident and then more confident.
Swell building up.
Got bigger. And then it was like 2 hours before dark, and then the bomb come through. Marco towed me.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So you were in the rope.
And yeah, I was on the rope and got the crazy one, and I let go speed, and I let go super deep. Had the top step, went down, and I could move the board still like a surfboard. It felt good.
Was good.
And then the big step come, the last step, and I hucked it, landed it, and then I couldn't believe it, landed it, boom. And as I looked up, I knew I was in the perfect spot, and then just stood tall, and the thing was just like,
No.
I was just like, oh my God, and just spat out.
And you made
And
it.
all the guys on the boat were just like, wow, they're freaking. I was just like, oh my God, what just happened?
Wow.
Yeah.
So you made it.
Then I
Crazy.
made it, yeah.
Tell me, it's a clip of that wave,
everyone-
right?
there's
We
a
have the clip.
Yeah, there's a clip. And then the year after, I'd go to Chumbo every year for Billabong, and I'd help with the grommets and with the trials, and I was going there for like a month.
Yeah.
But I take on my paddle boards because I take everything from shortboard I was taking my 7.2 for the big paddle. Well, I was only paddling, and I was there for a month, and you wouldn't believe it that at that exact time they had the double XL awards.
Yeah.
And they have the best ride, biggest wave, and they had Monster Tube Award.
Yeah.
And that wave,
Which year is this?
this was
2000.
so that was in 2004 when I rode the
the
Shipstone.
The Shipstone.
And then this was it was the beginning. It was 2005,
Okay.
and I was up. It was a guy got barreled at Jaws, maybe two guys at Jaws, and someone somewhere else. And
Yeah.
I didn't even go to the awards in America, or my sponsor didn't send me. I was at Chumbo surfing, but Shane Dorian and Andy were there.
Yeah.
Because Dorian was at the awards for something. And the phone rang. They said, "Oh, make sure you answer the phone at Mumpy and Poppy's where I stayed." I answer, and they put it on live, and I win the award. So
you were going live? No.
Yeah, on the phone. It was on a telephone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I won the Monster Tube Award
Man.
on the first ever.
You couldn't be.
I couldn't believe it.
You didn't expect it at all.
No.
Wow.
Yeah. I was
Man.
like, but I wasn't. I was hoping, but I wasn't expecting.
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So I got my big check that I always dreamed of because I never won a major competition.
Yeah.
And I got this big check for $5,000 US.
Man.
And then the next day was the big swell coming, a giant one. And so Dorian and Andy flew down with my check.
Yeah.
And they were Billabong. They stayed with me. It was called Mummy and Poppy's.
Yeah.
And I've stayed with the same family for the last 30 years.
Wow.
And they're like my Tahitian family.
Wow.
And they get there late in the night, and they're like, Dylan, here's your check. And I'm like,
They brought you the check.
oh
man.
my
That's
God.
crazy.
Andy Irons and Dorian give him a check for the
Man.
biggest share of the water. And I'm just like,
Crazy.
and then the next day is the swell. And it was giant, man. It was the one Dorian, and it was Psycho. And he went out first, and I was spewing because I didn't take this orange toe board because I had too many boards. I didn't pack it.
Claro.
And I was like, what am I going to ride? And Andy bought his,
Yeah.
Eric Arakawa, this red
Yeah.
one. So anyway, we go, and Dorian's just shut, and Brock Little started towing him in.
Yeah.
Only person out.
Wow.
And it was like as big as it gets. It was like Code Red Day nearly.
Yeah.
And me and Andy were sitting on the boat with Poppy, watched him just going, oh my God, we're just looking at each other going, what? And then I looked at Andy and I said, man, I want a tow. Can I use your board? I didn't bring my tow board. And he's like, yeah, man, for sure. Go grab it. So I zip in and I rigged up Andy's tow board. This red and failed it. Come back out, waited, and Brock Little said, yeah, I'll tow you, Dylan, no worries. And then my first wave, I was waiting out the back. And it was when the Jetski, the Red Bull Jetski went over the falls of Raymond.
Ah, like he does like this. And
yeah, with Reef McIntyre.
Yeah.
So I'm out there like, it's giant. And
sorry, that was your jet ski?
No. So wait. So,
okay, sorry.
So Reef's towing Raymana.
Yeah.
And they're like kind of first waiting. And then someone was towing Garrett McNamara.
Okay.
He was kind of second in liner. Then I was out the back behind them. I was like the grommet.
Okay.
And I was waiting for the last one with Brock Little, man. Brock Little was one of my heroes.
Man, yeah, of course.
Like that famous.
It's a legend.
So he's told me, and I'm just like, what's going on? Like, this is crazy. But I'm full, like, ready to, and I'm going to try this tow board.
Yeah.
Eric Arakawa's, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And gave me a lot of feedback to mine. So anyway, there you go. I didn't know because I'm way out the back. And so Reef's come in, and Reef hadn't had much experience. And Raymond's like, go, go, go. And he went a bit too close to the lip, and he got caught. And so Raymond's already on the wave. And then he jumped. And then lucky he ducked, and went under the Red Bull ski, and the Red Bull ski went over. I could hear everyone screaming, but I just thought they were screaming for the sets coming.
Okay.
And then Garrett got the next one, crazy one. Then there was an empty wave. And then the last one was like the biggest. And I went it, and the super west, psycho.
Almost
then,
closing.
Yeah, closed out. And I went down, down, down. And I was just holding my line going so fast. And right at the end bowl, it kind of closed out, clipped my edge, and went over.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God.
And the jet ski was somewhere around there.
It was right there. And then I was just like, oh my God. At my first wave, and I got smashed by the biggest, heaviest one. So I was just like, just trying to relax. I was just getting smashed. And I finally come up. I was like, oh my God, I'm alive. And then everyone's screaming at me. And I look, and like about 8 foot to me is that jet ski, the Red Bull jet ski. Raymana's there. There's people.
No, man.
And luckily,
you were like, what's going on?
I was just like, man, I'm alive.
What is this? Is this hell?
It's crazy.
Man.
And that was my first tow wave.
Wow.
Teahupoo. And then they got me, pick up me. I had to grab the Red Bull jet ski with the tow rope, and we dragged it into the channel, sinking. And then we all sat there and just gone, like, Raymana's just like, I'm alive.
Everybody was safe. Everybody okay.
Safe. Everyone's like, we all got together.
Yeah.
And we went to where I stayed, Mummy and Poppy's, and everyone's like, oh my God, and checking the photos and the video, what happened to Raymana. And
Crazy.
just like, and then after an hour, we're like, all right, let's all go back out.
No. And you went.
Yeah.
Man, crazy.
And then me and Andy just took turns, and it was a crazy day. Like,
man, how good you talk about Andy as...
Mate, he was like my hero, and he's such a good person. And then him giving me the check the night before, sharing his tow board, having that crazy day. There was that movie that they made on it. It was called Solid.
Yeah.
And it was from that day and all that, everything that went down.
Wow.
And then the next day was a perfect paddle day, huge. Yeah, so.
Man.
Yeah.
So you have a special connection to Chops, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, this was 2005.
This was 2005, and I've been going there since 97 already.
And in 2011, you got like a...
2011 was the Code Red.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then in between, so I was making all my paddle boards and learning how to paddle, and then obviously started getting more tow boards. And then Manoa Drillette got sponsored by Billabong, and then me and him got close through Teahupoo.
Yeah.
And so me and him become tow partners.
Ah.
And he was the man. He was the best out there,
yeah.
paddling, towing. And we spent so many years, like so many uncrowded days paddling, towing.
Crazy.
And the crazy ones that I towed him into that one, he got the biggest tube. It was a giant.
So you're talking about the big waves, your best connection or like your big wave or it's Chops.
Yes.
It's your place.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Hawaii,
was it.
you went to Hawaii.
I went to
also?
Hawaii for like 12 years from when I was 18 every year. And I was just always more focused on pipe. And I get a few out there, but it was hard, you know. It was
Crowded.
It was crowded in the pecking
It's
order.
crazy, no?
Yeah.
Because also in that era, you have the wolf packs, no? Like it's like no joke in the
no
water.
joking. It was heavy, like heavy dudes.
You just have to get in the water,
Yeah.
ice down.
Yeah. Where I found I had already this good connection with Chumbo, so I was more hunting there.
Yeah, of course.
And it was a lot less crowded.
Man, you have your place where you feel comfortable, where you know the people and stuff. Yeah.
So I was more focused on, I was still going to Hawaii, but I was more focused on Tahiti and Indo and Australia, and that was kind of my triangle. But yeah, and then it was so good with Manoa. Like, he taught me so much. He was the one that really taught me how to tow properly, use the jet ski, tow him, really coming super deep and really moving the board, like coming flying from deep, not coming down.
It's super tech, like.
Super tech line, but fast, a bit more heavier.
Yeah.
But it was actually safer because we'd come flying out of the barrel rather than getting pulled up the face. And then I was making him tow boards. I was making myself. And then Laurie Towner was my young team rider. And then that was about the similar time that I took Andy to his first surf at Shipstone. I was going down and I took him, and Laurie Towner was 16, turning 17. And I said, mate, come, I'm taking Andy. And he just started riding my boards.
Wow.
And then we had that crazy session where he got the crazy paddle one.
Yeah.
And Andy got crazy paddle tow. We all did Margot. Parko calm. It was one of the probably one of the most memorable sessions.
Man, when I was a kid, I loved Parko, man. Like my guy from the tour was Parko.
Yeah.
His power surfing, you know, like I don't know why I like his style. It's so powerful, man. Like
so it's so smooth, powerful, like best lines, and he's the best person too. Like so good to travel with. So
it's fun to travel with.
And then just in the water with him, you know, you'd be paddling out and you'd watch him surf, like whether it be small waves, medium or large. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. And Red Cold, was that day special also for you?
Yeah, and that was probably my pinnacle.
Yeah.
You know, and
I was going to ask you that wave, that swell, it's the pinnacle of your big wave surfing career?
It's hard to say, but I think so for sure. Like, I couldn't get any better. Like, so for all them years, I'd been towing already with Manoa, and I just, you know, I was just in a really good place, and I made so many tow boards. And I was teamed with Laurie, and he was my, you know, we'd already spent many years together. And then that's all come, and then everything happened, you know.
Everything
like,
converged together after a lot of hard work, practice, time.
Beatings, nearly getting killed a few times. A lot of mental stuff to get past, like...
man, big wave surfing is stressful also, no?
Stressful.
You have to deal with your head, man, like...
Well, where we'd stay at Chumbo, Mum and Poppy's, you could see the wave and hear it. The night before, it was so loud on these tow swells, you couldn't sleep. And
I believe you, man.
So much going on in your mind. It's the worst. That's the worst. The lead up.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably like this swell at Nazare in a few days. It's the lead up and what can go in your head.
Man, I remember, like, I always tell this because for me it was like, it still is crazy. It's like, you know, I spent a lot of time in NASA. I remember one of my first seasons here, I was staying with Lucas Chumbo, Yanko Sens and stuff. I was staying in their apartment. Yeah. I was sleeping in the sofa next to the kitchen. Yeah. And we could hear the waves, man. And I remember the next day was a huge swell. And I remember I was the filmmaker, you know, I was trying to sleep well, you know. Man, 3 a.m., all the guys were in the kitchen doing eggs, you know, and drinking coffee. And I was like, man, what's going on? Let me sleep, you know. But yeah, man. Then
that's what happens, yeah.
Man, I said, like, man, these guys, what I'm hearing now,
yeah,
these guys have to go there and charge these monsters, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And then, so that morning, it was code red. Like, there was no supposed to be boats.
Because you have this side also.
Yeah, and
everything is prohibited. No,
yeah. So this was the first code red, and it was in the middle of the contest. It was the middle of the Billabong Pro. So the whole world tour was there.
I remember. Yeah.
And then they said no one's allowed in the water, and it was the Billabong Pro.
Yeah.
The Billabong said you can't take the jet skis out, and I'm like, what? But the morning come, I was like, I'm going to be able to take it out. And in the morning, we had our friend from. He's from France, but he was out, and he goes, let's quickly, he could get out and check. And I had my son with me on that trip too. He was like 12 at the time, Jay, and Laurie, and we got on the boat and we went out, and it was so big, closing out, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like the ocean just collapsing. Man,
I see videos of that swell, and I get goosebumps. Man.
Yeah, this was when it was biggest and low tide, like 7 in the morning. Like
in low tide?
Light. Yeah, it was low tide, and it was the biggest. And a bodyboarder had paddled out, a local bodyboarder, and he was out by himself paddling.
Really?
And had to sit way back because there was no channel. And then he tried to paddle one, and it was the biggest, heaviest wipeout I've ever seen in my life. And he tried to stick it, and he just flew from the sky like at least 40 foot and just got smashed. And we couldn't believe what we seen. Wow. I was looking at Laurie, I was like, is this guy dead? And we were looking, waiting for him to come up. And he finally come up. I don't know how he survived. He probably he had no inflation or...
Nothing.
I spoke to Tahitian boys, Matai, and that. I said, do you ever... And they said, yeah, we know the guy. We've heard the story. I said, man, I seen it.
Wow.
I seen it. There was no footage. There was no camera.
Nothing.
Nah.
Man, I like those characters in the surfing industry. Like, man, those are the guys that nobody sees, and they are there, man.
Yeah, he's full underground bodyboarder, and his wetsuit, everything was ripped to pieces. I never seen him again, but the
you never see him. You didn't spoke him about that.
But then, so we went in and we went, let's just get ready and try and go out and just pick him, me and Laurie. Yeah. But we go in, and then they're like, you can't take the jet skis. The Billabong lawyer was there for the contest, and they said,
the Billabong what? The lawyer?
The lawyer, because it was the Billabong Pro.
Yeah.
So if we got hurt, we were sponsored by Billabong. So, but at the time, and again, it was another little blessing in disguise. We had to wait. It took us like 2 hours. But Raymana went out, and a couple of others, and they weren't making them, and got a bit beaten. And Raymana went, no one's surfing. Done. But we didn't know. At the time, I was arguing with my team manager, saying, look, this is what I do. And after like 2 hours of arguing, they're like, all right, this is how you're going to do it.
I imagine that conversation.
I was just like, and after like 2 hours, they said, look, we're going to take a blind eye. You got to cover up all the Billabong stickers on the ski.
Claro.
So we were down there with black tape, covering up the stickers. And like, so it took us like a couple of hours. And I had all my stuff on. I was like double life jacket.
Double.
I was pretty padded up because this was giant. This wanted to kill you out there. Man. And then so we went out, and it was me, Laurie Towner, and Benjamin Sancho and Dean Bowen. And me and Laurie got there first, straight in the channel. There's only like 3 or 4 boats with photographers. And I said, where is everyone? I said, oh no, everyone got hurt. No one can surf. And we're like, oh my God. So, okay. So we said, let's just watch a couple. And it was like, so angry, you know. But
man, the leap, the size of the leap.
We thought, we seen a couple and we thought, you know what, I reckon we can do this. And then we said, who wants to go first? And then he was like, all right, Laurie goes, I'll go first.
Buena.
All right, let's do it.
Vamos, Laurie. Thanks, Laurie.
And I towed him, and he got the craziest one. He went so deep, and he made it.
Buena.
And he's like spat out. And he goes, Dill, that was probably the most incredible barrel of my life. And I was going so far. So he goes, let's swap, you try. But he goes, just be prepared, you're going to go so fast. I said, I know already. I know what to do. Because I already had so many years towing.
But man, I imagine for him to tell you, beware, because you're going to go really fast.
Yeah, and it was
knowing
really
you
good.
were a big wave surfer, a tow surfer.
I already knew, but him telling me that, you're going to go even more fast than you've ever been in your life.
Wow.
And he goes, do the same line you always do. Like come from deep and then stay low. And as it pulls you up, you gain speed and you can ride incredibly deep.
Yeah.
And this is when I got my wave in my life. This was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And I'd made all my toe board was perfect. I had it weighted.
It was a yellow board, right?
Yeah, it was like
or
lime green.
Lime
like
green,
yellow
yeah,
green.
yeah, I remember the footage.
And it was just perfect. I've been riding it for a couple of years and seasons. My feet, everything felt perfect. And then he got me on one, and I let go a little bit too deep. And then I was like, oh my God. And then as I pumped, the whole thing bent. It was a super west one. And it was the one I always dreamed of. I always believed you could go deeper out there.
Yeah.
And this section come over, and I remember just following my line, trusting my line. But I remember just seeing, like, even I backdoored it. And I was so deep. I was like, oh my God. And I was so thick. But I just trusted my line. I was trying to pull me out. But I was just pressing so hard on my... So normally backside you're on your left rail, but I'm on my right, going like this. And I was going so fast. And I just held on. And as I was going to close out, I come out and then kicked out. And the first person to me, and he stayed with us, was Ricardo dos Santos.
Yeah.
He's passed away now.
Yeah.
And he was such a legend and good friend. Right. And he just come to me and just like crying, like, that was just the craziest thing I ever seen. And like Anthony Walsh, everyone was just like, you won't believe. I was just in shock.
Man.
But just ecstasy, like just tripping what happened.
You still dream with that vision, right?
Yes, I never lost that vision. And then seeing the footage back, and it just, everything went right.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we towed all day. Most people come out and only got one wave and got smashed, or two if you're lucky.
Yeah.
We surfed it all day, and
crazy.
And I stoked all the people on my boards were the ones making the waves. So for me as a shaper, it was so good as a surfer, being a surfer.
Man,
as a shaper, I was every board, and it's everyone that rode my board would make the waves.
Yeah.
Pato from Brazil, he was one of my early guys that trusted me.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was a big thing for me as a shaper.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a before and an after.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And well, this was 2011.
This was 2011.
We're more or less in the time that Nazare was discovered.
Yeah.
That year, more or less.
Yeah.
Do you remember, maybe you don't remember if at this point you heard about Nazare?
I remember seeing, not at that point I didn't.
No.
Because and then it was 2013 that we'd done, me and Laurie got caught up for PointBreak. And I was Bodie and he's Johnny Utah, and we were just like,
man, tell me that experience. It was crazy.
Yeah, and we waited 2 years because they watched that footage. And then Laurie matched Johnny Utah, and I matched Bodie. And then I was like, oh my God, we're going to be stunt doubles. We couldn't believe it.
And so you were with the guys and like...
Yeah. And Billy Kemper was with him, and Tikanui Smith, local, and Bruce Irons was back up for Laurie. Yeah. And that was when Laurie got hurt. He nearly killed him. And Ladd was Johnny Utah's driver, and Romano was for Bodie. And we got there, and we're doing all the underwater scenes, and they said, we're Warner Brothers, and they go, we're going to shut the lineup down. It's going to be 30-foot glassy, low tide west. No, there's going to be no one out, just Laurie and Dylan. And me and Laurie just looked at each other and went, are you kidding me? Like, what is going on? So
with the camera,
but there was a little kerfuffle because people want to surf it still. And at this time, Laurie already started going. Lab started towing. Laurie got two crazy ones. And then the third one, he got a closeout, and he went. He had the perfect line, but fully closed out. And he went down, and his head hit the reef, knocked out, really bad. His face, and a piece of reef went like this, stabbed him in the neck, went either side of his artery. The surgeon couldn't believe it. And then
during the filming,
he woke up in the lagoon, and
this was during the filming.
Yeah, for Johnny. And then Laird got him, and he woke up, and he's like, "I'm okay." And Laird goes, "No." And then picked him up, and the chopper come and took him to hospital. And then I'm like, "Oh, is Laurie okay?" Like I was worried about him, but then I also had a job to do. Yeah. And then so Bruce backed him up, and then I got back in zone of making sure they said Laurie's gonna be okay. Had to do surgery. And he just had his baby, and his wife had to fly over. Oh. Baby had no passport. It was pretty freaky for them. Yeah. and then me and Bruce done the stunt doubles, and I did a crossover. Yeah, so I said, Bruce, I'll come flying from deep, my line, and he come down, and we're on the swell, and as the wave started to break, I went over his line, cross, like this. I was in front, and I had to look back at him in the barrel, so it's barreling. And I look back, I'm looking back at him going, how'd it go? Follow my line, because it's my way of being.
Yeah.
And he's like, ah!
This was in the script?
And
No.
then, well, no, but that's what they wanted. Yeah. And then we both kicked out, and they freaked out.
Man, I would...
Yeah.
Guys, watch the movie again because...
Yeah.
Man.
Especially the making of, because you see a lot more. The making of on the YouTube or whatever, you see a lot what we were doing. Because, and then all this footage, mate, and then it was a month later, and we had another tow swell. They got us back, and me and Bruce towed each other with reds in our hands, with floaties.
No.
and Bruce is riding the barrel, like so deep, and I'm in
subject,
front of him.
The
I've got
POV.
photo, yeah. But we never got to use the footage. They only used the tiniest bit.
Yeah.
But it was the craziest stuff. It was
Crazy.
wild.
Crazy. Man.
He actually snuck his own GoPro in his wetsuit and shot me and put it in his mouth. And it's the craziest shot of me. Like, he's behind me.
Wow.
Yeah, and he goes, Dill, come here at night. Look, I got a GoPro.
No.
I was like, you're kidding me. And
No.
it's crazy. I'll show you the photo.
Please, man.
Yeah.
Well,
And then it was around that time that I seen a photo of Garrett
in Nazare.
at Nazare. And I was like, I couldn't believe the size. The wave, I'd never seen a wave that big.
You were amazed already.
Yes.
You saw the picture and you said, man, this is different.
I saw the footage.
The footage.
And I was just blown away. I was like, what is that? I've never... and it was that big, clean one.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't believe the size.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then I was just like, wow, what is that, But I was still doing my thing and shaping and chasing swells. And then Garrett and that kept going and going, and then started seeing more, and I was like, what's this place? And I was so busy, I had family, and this time I'd moved to Bali. So I was shaping there. So I left JS and I went out on my own business.
That's where you created Dylan? Dylan Shapes?
Yes, and that's where I created Dylan Shapes. End of 2009, and then I got an opportunity to shape in Bali, and my family loved it there, so I was living there I lived there for nearly 10 years, but I was not all year. I'd go back to Australia and shape. And then that was the best, because then I was chasing swells in Indo. I was going up to Apocalypse and Nias and
moving around
a lot, so I was so busy. But then I had an opportunity to come shape in Portugal in 2015, 2016 season.
This was because of Nazare?
Because of Nazare.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was called Org Surfboards here, and they already started making some tow boards, and then they wanted me to come in. There was a shaper called Rabbit from here, and he's a famous shaper and such a legend. I got to work with him, and we shaped under. And I brought my tow experience, my boards, my big wave, my guns. And I started surfing Nazare. I started shaping here, and I'm like, all right, I got to surf this way.
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, yeah. And I was already visioning it, like my lines.
Yeah.
It was totally different. And when I got out there, I couldn't believe the size. It was huge. It was like 50, 60 foot day. And I was like, all right. And luckily at the time, the team riders were Antonio Silva and Joao de Macedo. Yeah. And they were the two local guys. Yeah. So they had so much experience already of paddling and towing there. And so they were my guys, and I had the best crew to come and learn from as a shaper and a surfer. And especially like Antonio was probably the best driver. Yeah. Jetski pilot. Yeah. So to have him there, because Nazare, which I didn't know before I got there, but you needed safety. You couldn't just go with someone.
The Jetski pilots, they need to be as good or better than the surfers.
Yes, and it's super important. So I trusted Antonio and the boys. And that's when I started. And I brought my boards from Teahupoo and I tried it and it didn't work.
No.
Wow. Yeah, I got smashed and I was just like, and the boys told me, I remember Rafa Tapia Because I shaped
Rafael
some
David,
boards
yeah.
for him. He goes, man, you need different boards from here. It's totally different.
Yeah.
And then when I first rode the
You
first day, I
realized
went
what was going on.
straight off, knew by surfing it.
Bien.
All right, yeah, I need to go back to the drawing boards, shaping.
Before we get to the Nazare boards, with you coming with this huge background from like chops and Hawaii and stuff.
Yeah.
Was that is that big the difference
Yeah.
with Nazare being in the lineup, being in the rope?
It was crazy. Like, so I'd surf Code Red, or I'd surf all
That's
the biggest.
why you have the best background.
The
For-
biggest
for
in
coming to
Australia.
Nazare.
Yeah, the biggest in Australia, the biggest in Indo.
Yeah,
The biggest
chops.
Chumbo
Yeah.
ever. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and some crazy big days at Waimea and Pipe.
Yeah.
Sunset closing out.
Yeah.
But then this was a whole new level. I couldn't believe the
But and you forgot something. It's cold.
it was cold.
It's dark. It's windy.
It was all them elements too. You know, I was putting on a 5'4".
3 layers.
I
boots.
never wore inflatable. I when we towed big Teahupoo and slabs, we'd put on a Jetski life jackets.
Yeah.
We didn't have impact vests.
No,
then.
no.
There was no such thing.
Yeah.
And then what's this inflatable thing? Oh yeah, you need to wear these.
You have to pull from
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Then if you want to,
These canisters. So they put it on us.
you only have 4.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was a whole new world to me.
Yeah.
But then my first surf out there was like 50, 60 feet. It was a huge day. Straight into it. And they're like, yeah, you'll be right, Dill. Like, they just expected me to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, give me the rope. And
Yeah.
I remember letting go way out and it just faded out. But I was just like, and I was like, oh man, like I was already towing for so long and the bumps. It's the first thing I felt like. And I'm on these, you know, I couldn't believe the size.
Wow.
It's just like, and if you haven't, you see it from the land, but then being out there is a different story.
Yeah.
It's way bigger.
Way bigger.
Way bigger.
I don't know. I remember I was filming an episode. I don't remember if it was with Alemán or something. That man, like when you get in the water, it looks huge.
Yeah.
I went in smaller days,
Yeah.
but then I go back. I see the footage and it's like, man, this is not what I serve. No, man. This is not the size of, man, it's
Yeah.
huge inside.
Yeah. And then because you're looking left, there's one there. And with the slabs, we're taking off out or across, where they're moving so fast, you kind of nearly got to be in front of them. And then to catch it, like you're not coming from behind.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there in between these giant mountains and just the scale of them and how fast they're moving. And then and the biggest thing for me once I took the drop was the speed.
The speed.
So remember the speed, I said to Laurie, that's the fastest I've ever gone.
Yeah, that's the base speed.
Until Nazare, man, I was like another 20k faster at least.
Wow.
And I was, oh my God, I was going down, and I got more speed as it got steeper. Wow. And it was just such a different feeling. And because people said, it's not a hollow wave. And so it was a different style for me because I come from big barrels and slabs. So I had to, it was a difference, like slalom, you know?
Yeah.
But then just to control the bumps, and you had to be back-footed, and it was just so different.
It's a different
and new,
sport.
And, yeah, and then so, which was good because it taught me so much about tow boards, and then I'd come back, and then I'd run back to the factory here. I was putting in weights here.
Yeah.
I'd change fins. Next swell, go back, try this, and then I was working it out, with myself and the team, and then it was a progression each year, learning and changing and evolving, and then it was about 2018, 19 when me and Lucas connected. I was watching the paddle comp. I was there for that, and which was incredible. And because I was also working on the guns too.
Yeah.
You know, I was making 11 boards, 10-6, 10-2, 9-6s. So I was working on the guns and the toes, but then Lucas being connected, and then we sponsored him, and then I went to another level of shaping and surfing.
Lucas is...
And team. So, because he was just so naturally talented. And surfing them waves, like performance, like it was like carving and barrels. And
man, he's surfing Nazare as like
incredible.
80 feet as it was like 8 feet.
Yeah. And again, on the land, you see him, it looks ridiculous. He's like this little ant, he's just flying and airs. But then in the water, you see it. That's crazy. When you see him, you're like,
because it's
you're looking
the
side
speed
on,
and
he's just coming at it and then hacking, pulling in.
It's
and you're
crazy.
just like, oh my God, he's just surfing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, which also helped me because I was like, all right, I can put performance into these boards, not just survival stance and going down the mountain.
Yeah.
So I had to make a few different boards, some for people that just going like straight, and then people that want to surf the way.
So meeting Lucas for you was a big challenge.
Yes.
As a shaper.
Yes.
Bueno.
Yeah.
Then.
It was a big challenge and so much learning curve, and it was awesome, you know. And then everything, because he rips 1 to 100 foot.
Yeah.
So I was making the short boards for him, the slabs, take him to Chumbo. He's incredible, Hawaii, and the guns, paddling jaws.
Yeah, everything.
So that's where I really learned a lot about a lot of my other boards that I already knew, and then also my guns and my toes.
Bueno.
Yeah.
Dylan, let's get a little bit now into shaping like boards. So for Nazare, you said you had to change a lot your shaping of toe boards.
Yeah.
What did you have to change? Like, how were the boards you were doing before Nazare?
Yeah.
About the line, the outlines, the weights, and what changed to Nazare?
Yeah, so a lot of the toe boards I was riding were for big slabs, and then I'd made a couple for like jaws, but it was more so for big Chumbo, big shipstones, huge
hollow waves.
Bigger hollow waves.
Yeah.
So more so for cross the waves and riding inside the barrel.
Yeah.
Where this, you know, so I had to change my outline, my rocker. The weight was really important because the stance, you have to be on the back foot. You're really, and I'm a front foot surfer, and that's on a bit more on barrels and airs, being front foot. So I had to change my surfing for Nazare. But then I had to put weight in the board because the board couldn't handle the size and the speed.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I want to try it. I want to just go super fast without weight. And I did it. I couldn't handle it. And I fell. And I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Trial and error. But then, so I was putting weights, moving them back, moving them forward, and trial and error, and then also with the team. But yeah, that was a big thing, is where you put in the weights for Nazare. Yeah. Because you're so back-footed and you're going so fast, but the fins have got to stay in the water. Yeah. I kind of familiarised it. Laurie Towner had this was before Jetskis, he had a Thundercat. Yeah. It was an inflatable boat with a heavy motor on the back.
Yeah.
And they used to go so fast, and just the motor would be in the water, and the nose would be lift, and they nearly do wheelies.
Yeah.
Like going so fast. And I could relate that to a Nazare toe board. So the fins have got to stay in, but you're flying, hitting bumps.
Yeah.
But the weight had to be on the tail.
To stay there, yeah.
Yeah.
Also the tail to be like a fin, an extra fin, right?
Yeah.
That's how you think in the tail also?
Yes, and then that's when I also started playing with fins. When I first started, I wanted to use quad. I wanted to go faster.
Yeah.
But I needed the back fin in, and you needed a bigger back fin, and that's when I worked out, the bigger back fin, the better.
Yeah.
And then I was making some of my own fins. Like I made a huge fin
for
Lucas and all the boys, and they loved it with 2 little smalls.
Yeah.
So it was a lot.
The quad, right?
No, thruster.
Thruster.
Yeah, big back fin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big back fin.
Yeah, so I trial and error a lot of fins.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just like, and then with the technology, you know, we started putting carbon fiber, certain parts, changing weights, changing the rails, going way thinner. The outlines were so different. They were like rockets, you know, like rocket ships.
Dylan, a lot of people don't know how heavy the Nazare boards are. Like everybody I take to Nazare for the first time, they grab the board and it's like, man, what is this? Why? Can you explain the people why you have boards from 7 kilos to 11 kilos?
Yeah.
Why you need 11 kilos and why 7? And,
So the same in my Australian factory. I always have some toe boards, and these are light ones. These are like 4.5 kilos of mat. And the same, I go, oh, have you ever felt a toe board? The customer's like, no, okay, pick this up. And they can't believe it.
Yeah.
So then the people that come here, and I the same as you, I go pick up this 10 kilo board like that one there.
The big one.
And it's people just trip out. They go, oh my God, it's 10 kilos, but it feels like 20. That's crazy. It feels heavier.
It feels heavier.
And then people, normal surfboards can't believe the weight. So what I found is, I don't need lead weights up to 4 kilo boards, and then anything up, I still need to start putting lead in certain places.
Yeah.
And the bigger the wave is, the more weight you need.
Why?
So you can have more control.
Yeah.
A lot more control of the wave, and then that's what I find, because your board just starts going too fast and starts skipping out.
Yeah.
So the weight would actually have your control, can control the speed, and keep that tail and fins
And
engaged.
kill the bumps, right?
Yeah. So we're finding, for the giant days, them 80-foot days, with like 10 kilo boards.
Yeah.
And then the 60-foot days was like 8 kilos, and the 40-foot days were 67 kilos. And then, so we've been playing with that for like the last 6 years, or more, so 8 years now.
Wow.
But now, recently, in the last few years, as it's evolved,
Yeah.
and all the surfers evolve, we've especially like Lucas Chumbo and Kai Lenny, they're starting to come lighter on the bigger days, and riding like Lucas has been riding on some big days. He was riding 5 kilos. It was ridiculous.
But I think that's because he has so much control, right?
He has so much control. He has big legs, and even that Cortez Bankswell last year, him and Justine, he rode. It was so clean. He rode the 5 kilo.
Really?
I couldn't believe it because it was so clean.
Yeah.
But going back to a lot
You
of
will never find Nazare as clean as Cortez, I imagine, like
pretty
glassy,
rare. Yeah, super rare. But so now, like some of the days, people are riding 10, now they're riding 9 kilos. Or some people ride 9 or ride 8, and playing a little bit more, because even a lot of the other surfers, it's evolved out there so much, and people are surfing the wave a lot more. People pulling in and carving.
They're figuring out how you surf a huge wave,
How
right?
to surf a huge wave. So the boards have helped us, and the evolution, like the surfing, all of us, from surfing slabs to airs.
Yeah.
So the boards have changed, but that, in a nutshell, that's what the weights are doing.
Yeah. And how do you choose talk me a bit about the tail of the boards.
Yeah, so the tail, it's the most important thing probably in the board. It's where the engine is, and the fins, and the weights are moved, that's real tail heavy, but it's super, it's nearly like a snowboard thin at the end. It's because you really want to cut the water, and you're going so fast, and it's like going down a mountain. You don't want it thick and chunky or too wide, so you really want to engage that rail.
You need the rails to be sharp,
Sharp.
To work as an extra fin.
Yeah, you want it to bite, Yeah. And then, especially once you get to the bottom of the wave with so much speed, you don't want to lose that speed, and then that wave catch you. Yeah, and then you want to
go up.
Yeah, and then you want to be able to get that rail in.
The bottom, right?
Yeah, so it's not just the tail, it's that whole rail line, and how you got the rail line, and also the bottom's super important. If you're going to have concave.
You have concaves?
Yeah. I have a deep single, and some I have a single into double.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
A single to a double.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been playing with that a bit more, just so I could get board and a bit more rail.
Okay.
I've tried V-bottoms. I've tried flat decks, all sorts of stuff, but I still find that,
figuring out what's
it's like any shaping and surfing. We're always learning, I was telling the guys yesterday at Nazaré, I'm always learning and getting feedback from the guys.
How important is that, the feedback and the communication with the surfers?
So important, because we're always chasing that perfect board to get that feeling of like we don't have to worry. We can just surf the wave like we want to.
Yeah.
Whether you're surfing a 3-foot wave and it's your magic board, you don't have to think. You can just do whatever you want to do. There's a section, you hit it, do it air, you can do it, or you go vert. Same surf big waves. We're always chasing that magic board, making refinements in the shape, in the technology, in the design, the fins, and we're always learning. And we're still learning, especially for Nazaré. It's so young.
Yeah, true.
Like compared to Teahupoo, compared to Pipeline, compared to Waimea Bay.
Yeah.
So it's really progressed so fast over the last 10 years or 12 since Garrett and all the crew and Toddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where is your satisfaction in doing this kind of boards? Like,
My-
for example, Lucas gets the biggest wave ever surfed.
Yeah.
There is, or it's like in the watching the lines, or like,
Yeah.
or in the feedback.
Yeah.
You know?
For me, it's, he's obviously seeing Lucas and all the riders on your board and seeing them make the wave
Yeah.
is the satisfaction, they're working.
Yeah.
But then you start to see, and get the feedback and see him riding it. You're just like, man, it's working. Because it's a wave of consequence. You don't want anyone to fall. Any fall is going to be gnarly.
You feel
So
guilty now?
You kind of do sometimes because it's hectic. Justine had a pretty bad one, and I felt bad.
Claro,
I don't know
I
if it's
imagine,
the
man.
board or the wave, but it's so easy to hit a bump.
I mean,
But
you don't need to, it's not
it's easy
but
to-
I imagine myself, I would be like, man, I did something wrong?
Yeah.
You
It
know?
is, it's
Yeah.
it's a lot of responsibility on us, and a lot of shapers go, I don't know how you can do it, because there is a lot of responsibility on the shapers making the boards a pipeline or a Chumbo or Nazare, but we try and stay positive, and then this is where we're also getting feedback of okay, what didn't feel right at that board? Where can we make the changes? And so I think the satisfaction is safety, and then just see them ride the wave how they want to.
Yeah.
Whether you're Lucas Chumbo or whether you're one of the guys from Germany or
Them
Australia,
taking the best out of them, right?
and them making the waves and rising and pushing to a level that they want to get to,
performing.
and performing and succeeding.
Yeah.
That's the satisfaction.
Yeah. Dylan, how do you getting into the shape room? When you grow so much in the now it's your work, it's a business. Do you still have a connection in the shape room? How do you feel inside there? It's therapy for you also.
It's therapy. It's where I get away from the world. It's just me and the board, and I put my headphones on, and I put music on, my favorite music.
Can I know what?
Oh yeah, all sorts of stuff, a lot of rock.
Heavy rock.
Like chili peppers, all sorts of stuff.
Chili pepper is always a good option.
A bit of everything.
Yeah.
But also I put on a podcast or there's talkback radio.
Yeah.
So while and it's on in overnight in Australia. So when I'm here, and they just talk about life, and you kind of
hearing a conversation.
Yeah, and you're shaping, but you're in the zone. Your hands, eye, and you're thinking, you're listening, but you're thinking of what I'm doing, and it's like therapy, and I like it, and then sometimes when I'm shaping the board, I think of what the board's going to do. So I try and dream it when I'm shaping it.
Wow.
This board's going to do this line, or I'm shaking a slab board. This board's going to get in early and it's going to knife.
Wow.
I think of what the board's going to do.
Wow.
So you kind of put an energy in the board, but
Yeah.
it's just my own little thing.
No, of course.
And it was cool because I did it, and then I did a lot of work with my early toe boards, toe fins with Alan Byrne.
Okay.
He was a famous shaper. He was the legend 6-channel shaper and a surfer, from Pipe Masters days, and he used to do the same. He said,
Oh, really?
which was cool. Yeah, he used to think, this board's gonna as you're doing the rails or the bottom.
Man, how crazy
you're
having a
picturing.
beer with him, and suddenly he was like, "No, man,
Yeah.
when I shape, it's like, man, I do the
Yeah.
same."
yeah. And I think probably a lot of shapers do that.
Yeah.
And when you're shaping them, you're kind of visioning what the board's going to do. And then you kind of see things maybe I'll take a bit off here or here. And then you think of the lines. And so it is like therapy. I don't have to talk to anyone. And it's just me and the board. And
You're in your
I
zone.
can put in my music. And yeah.
Yeah. Dylan, how much do you think the shaping or the boards have for developing? Do you think there's still a lot in materials, in shape, outlines? There's still a lot to evolve.
Well, yeah, I think so. We've evolved so much. Going back to I told my father from the 60s.
Yeah.
Longboards. The shortest board was 8-9 foot, probably 9 to 10 foot. and using 12-ounce glass.
Yeah.
So, and then look at the generations, how much it's evolved surfboards and surfing. And it's going to get pretty futuristic, I think, in the next, the level of surfing.
Maybe that's the correct word, no? Like futuristic.
Yeah, it's going to be more futuristic.
Yeah.
Like, I've thought of some ideas, like, of like being in a giant barrel and getting propulsion. Like you can, I'm too deep here, but you got an extra like a mini jets or something.
Yeah.
I think that's a possibility. Like you look at cars.
As soon as they don't use it to paddle, because then the lineup, man. For me, that I surf small waves, man. The lineup, if
So I think for surfboards, the best is our polyester and epoxy.
Okay.
We have the two, and then we've got carbon fiber, carbon Kevlar. We've got all these things we're working with, and everything's at the peak. But I think going further, it's going to be more futuristic and get a bit more technical. Who knows? But we never thought we'd probably be here doing that stuff at Nazaré 15 years ago.
Man, I think also that's also big. Nazaré happens also thanks to the evolution of the boards and the technology, because I was interviewing Colomona, the Jetski pilot, man, and he was saying, man, Nazaré, you couldn't surf Nazaré without the Jetski, or like it would be impossible, right?
Yeah, and Ladd was such a influence for all of us, and I was so lucky to spend so many years time with him and learn so much. He was a shaper too.
Yeah.
And he was at the forefront of it and learnt, they were time behind the rubber ducky.
Yeah.
Then the jet skis and the jet skis evolving, and then the tow boards, and then all of us trying and learning and changing. So it's going to be pretty rad, like especially at a wave like Nazaré, where it's pretty consistent and giant waves. And I think there's a huge future in surfing there. And, you see what Lucas Chumbo's doing now already, like, it's gonna be mind blowing in the future. So.
Yeah, Dylan, do you have any plans for the future, like projects going on? What are your plans for the next year?
I've got a really good platform now of areas in the world like Portugal, where I come shape, Canary Islands, Bali. I still go to Teahupoo because now my daughter's getting a big wave surfing too, and shaping as a girl,
third generation.
So last year I took her to Teahupoo and stayed with mummy and poppy.
Buena.
Yeah, third generation, and now I go to Brazil. So I have my areas, and I go with the seasons, and so I still get to surf the crazy waves. I'm going there for shaping, but I still get.
Man, you're reinventing yourself, always finding the perfect way
I'm
to
traveling
enjoy.
more now as a shaper than I did when I was getting paid as a free surfer. So.
Less responsibilities with like brands and stuff, no?
Yeah.
Like it's
I got no responsibility. It's my brand. I get to do what I want now.
Yeah.
And I can pick the seasons when I want to be at Teahupoo, when I want to be in Brazil, Bali. I just go for a swells shape, and here I come twice a year. I come at the start of the season, and it's awesome. Like, this is my dream, and thanks to my wife, and she was my big supporter, and I owe all this to her. Like, because without her, she could have been, you can't do that. And I'm out there like nearly killing myself. And
good partners are good for us,
yeah,
no?
I come from nothing, It's we do it for the love, and she's, happy for me that I'm living my dream. She was just here with my youngest daughter, and I get to travel the world with my family and shape.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Dylan, before we finish, I have like 10 words. I'm doing like a Nazapedia,
Yes.
to describe some words. These ones are mostly about boards and stuff, words. I want you to define them as like, it doesn't have to be too long, short, whatever you can say. So the blank.
Yeah.
Okay.
PU is the best. And I've been playing with different blanks for Nazaré, different stringers, for different flex, for max speed. So the blank is super important. Yep.
Yeah. Tow boards.
Tow boards is gone next level, and it's something I've loved doing as a shaper, and it's taking me to places and ride waves that I could never imagine.
Yeah. Outlines.
are super important, like one of the most important things, and they're one of the things you always dream of, and you're always looking, and you know them sexy lines and rocket ships or fun boards. So yeah, I love outlines.
Yeah, and rockers.
Rockers, can be so diverse. There's so many rockers to match outlines, wherever small waves, medium, big slabs. So yeah, rockers probably one of the most important things in surfboards.
Stringers.
Stringers, yeah.
They have stringers.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So stringers are really important for big waves, and we need them for strength, stiffness, flex, durability. Yeah, so stringers are super important.
Yeah. Weights.
Weights, like I said, weights is come into my life for Nazaré. I never used weights before, but now I've been playing with weights the last 8 years, and it's super important. It's something we need to surf Nazaré.
Bien. Fin setups.
Yeah, so important. This is something I'm constantly trial and error, and yeah, always playing with all different setups because I love my 20s, I love my thrusters, quads, and depends small wave or big wave.
Bien. Rails.
Yes, one of my favorite parts because this is what you're riding the wave with, and so it's something I've had to learn what really works in every wave.
Bien. And Nazare.
The beast. It's the beast. It's like nothing in this world. Yeah.
Perfect. Bueno, Dylan, thanks. That's all. It was a long conversation. Amazing. I really like it.
Hopefully not too
Thanks
long.
for being here with us.
Yeah.
Man, I wish you the best for upcoming projects and everything. So
Thank you.
anything you want to say to the people that is watching?
Ah,
Besides subscribing,
please subscribe, please, guys.
No.
Thanks for listening, tell my story. And yeah, can't wait to the rest of the season. There's a big swell in a few days, and can't wait to see all the guys and girls charge it.
Thank you, guys.
You.
Perfect.